Founders of Alexandria. By Star Scribe. Part 2. Joseph. Chapter 3. Mariah was still seething by the time they made their way back to their house. Okay, maybe not house. The tiny town of Paris, Illinois had hundreds of homes. Unfortunately, all of them were set up to require a connection to power, water, and sewage. As they had yet to repair or replace any of these three systems on a universal scale, they would all have to live like nomads for a little while longer. After having the last city he lived in burned to ash around him, Joseph actually liked it. If the same thing happened here, he could take his home with him this time. Well, he would have if he'd known how to drive. He had Mariah for that. All of them had chosen from among the most expensive and luxurious models available, knowing full well that by the time they wore down they would long since have switched to living in proper homes. There was a subtle irony in the unit Joseph had chosen. It was meant to transport horses. The back third of the vehicle contained enough space for two of the gigantic animals, though it had none of them now. The choice had been made for good reason, though. It was where he kept the servers of the Kimball Elnet. The reassuring blue glow from behind the glass divider told him all he needed to know about the current functionality of the system, so he turned his attention to something more pressing, calming Mariah down. He went straight to the wine cooler, as he generally did whenever some pony got her into one of these moods. He found what he had been looking for, an expensive bottle he had liberated during his visit to St. Louis, and popped the cork with a simple effort of will. He hardly even heard the mare ranting, focusing his attention instead on drawing two crystal glasses from a cabinet and filling them each about a third of the way. He had been with her long enough that acting like he was paying attention had become almost reflexive. Not here, I completely agree there, and the mare was none the wiser. Or so he told himself. Joseph took both glasses over to the couch where Mariah sat, offering her one in his glowing pink grip. He was tired enough from having to hold Adrian that he actually noticed the difference when she took it and he had half the weight to hold. "I'm really going to do it, Joe," she said, after taking a gentle sip from her glass. "If he mutilates Adrian in his sleep, I'll kill him." Joseph hopped up onto the couch, careful not to agitate it too much. Unlike Mariah, who had to sit strangely in order to give her access to her forelegs to manipulate objects while she sat, Joseph could just sit on his haunches the way the pony body seemed to want to and use his magic for what his hands had once done. He also couldn't tell the difference between a $10 bottle of wine and a $500 bottle, but apparently Mariah could, because her first few sips were all it took to make her smile. "We'll have to get the rest of this on our next trip, this is amazing." She swirled the glass around in her hooves, which Joseph personally found just a little amazing. The other ponies in his group could demonstrate some fantastic dexterity, including holding crystal wine glasses without breaking them. Maybe there was another form of magic he just didn't need to learn. It was all he could do to keep up with her train of thought. "He won't do it." Joseph took another crude sip. "Oliver knows how much you don't want him to do it without asking Adrian's permission first." Mariah's face darkened again. "Oliver doesn't care what I think." "No," he reluctantly agreed. "But he cares what Alex thinks, and Alex wants Alexandria to be peaceful." She glowered at her glass, before taking a long swig, wiping the excess away on the back of her leg. It wasn't a particularly ladylike behavior. Joseph didn't really care, he wasn't very ladylike either. "I guess not. It still seems wrong to me she would even consider subjecting another pony to what I felt. Taking something precious away in your sleep like that." Her words hit him like a null-pointer exception, and made him feel equally stupid. Of course Mariah wouldn't want Adrian to get a wing amputated while he slept. How had he not realized what she was going on about for so long? Clearly life needed to teach him a little humility. "We could go to the hospital and make sure," he offered, briefly resting his head on hers. There was enough of a height difference between them that it was easy, even with the difference in the way they were sitting. "Not yet." She took another sip of wine. "He'll have to properly sedate him." Get an X-ray, dig through equestrian books, we're safe waiting a few minutes. Just don't pour me any more of this, okay? I might drink it if you do, and we'll need to think clearly. Joseph nodded. It took more than half a glass of wine for him to feel much of anything, Mariah too. Ponies didn't have nearly the resistance humans did, though, they just didn't have the mass. They wouldn't be any help to Adrian if they were drunk. How's the radio coming? I saw all those trucks of stuff you drove to the courthouse. Mariah relaxed. Nobody wants to let other people know we're here more than I do. She accepted his touch, leaning against him in a way that was far more friendly than sexual. He was glad for that, he was far too exhausted for anything more than friendship right now. I'm getting better at the electrician stuff. The problem is energy, the wider the area we cover, the more power we need. You don't just lay solar panels on the ground and expect them to work, you've got to get the angle right, make sure they won't be shaded, wire them all up correctly so the voltage works right, get them into the inverter without ending up with too little or too much current. Not to mention that depending on solar means we don't get to send anything at night. Unless you want to have a room full of batteries, which means we would be setting up 3 battery backups. At some point it would just be easier to get the city's power on again. You think we have enough ponies to set that up? She grunted. Probably not. But we'd be closer if the ponies we had could use their powers. She looked up towards her forehead, towards the void. I feel like trying the prosthetic again. We could practice some levitation together before we go to the hospital. I might need it, if Oliver tries anything. Joe felt a chill behind his heart. He really didn't want to do the prosthetic thing tonight. Mariah had a tendency to blow holes in things whenever she wore it. You sure you wouldn't rather take me down to the courthouse? We could work on the radio together. We could make the first broadcast. Maybe we could get your antenna to transmit all the way to those other ponies wherever they're at. Mariah shoved him, before setting her empty glass down and hopping down onto her hooves. I'm going to practice again, Joseph. I would prefer you come with me, but I won't force you. If she tried unicorn magic without him, she might set the town on fire, might end up a crater. Okay. He hopped onto his hooves, glancing longingly at his 3DS before following Mariah down the steps and out onto the gravel path that led to their door. Mariah led the way to the many pull-out drawers on the side of the RV, gripping one in her mouth and drawing it outward. She didn't have to take it very far, just far enough to expose a slim wooden box inside it. She carried it in her mouth over to a folding table and chairs, flipping on the exterior lights with a hoof as she went. The tiny rosewood box was one of the many gifts Alex had brought back from Alexandria, apparently one that had been given to her after inquiring about Mariah's condition. Alex hadn't said much about it, except that they were extremely expensive in Alexandria and that there weren't any more in all the gifts Alexandria had given them. Mariah had to treat it like a sacred relic, since they would have to reverse engineer it one day. A flick with her nose undid the latch, and she delicately lifted the front of the box away with her teeth. The prosthetic rested on a bed of felt, insulated from any motion by the protection of several little wedges of foam. It consisted of a single piece of carved wood, shaped into an average-looking horn. A chunk of crystal emerged from within, wrapped with thick cloth and attached to a harness meant to wrap around the head. Several little brass straps and clips secured the whole thing in place, though the little charm made the straps take on the color of Mariah's coat and mane when it was actually worn. Of course, not having a horn meant getting it on her face was basically impossible without help, but Joseph was equal to that. He undid the buckles one by one, lifted the whole assembly onto Mariah's head, and tightened each until it was secure. It wouldn't have been true to say that he couldn't tell Mariah was wearing a prosthetic, but it looked worlds better than the stump she normally had. Don't try anything. He set a hoof on her shoulder, firm enough to push her down a little. Let's get away from the RVs. That field back there will be perfect. Away from where anyone lives. Mariah complied, though he was fairly sure she wouldn't have if he hadn't been so insistent. Mariah was like a flame, fit to consume everything if not carefully controlled. That was just fine with him, though. Joe could do fire. Even if he generally preferred peace, war could be fun too. What are we doing first? Mariah asked, eager. Something awesome, right? Something awesome. Yet. It was full-on night now, and pony vision just wasn't good in the dark. The glow of the RV had barely been enough to get this far. So before he could search, he had to make light. Good thing he had been reading about the light charm today. Perfect time to give it a shot. His horn flickered under his concentration, sparking several times before it finally began to glow, radiating a soft pink like a little lava lamp. Maintaining the glow while levitating over a few rocks for Mariah was trivial after that, neither took very much of his energy. That was a good thing, since he had so little to spare right now. He picked the smallest stones for that reason, making a pile on a clear patch of dirt and dismissing the levitation spell. Once cast, he could keep the glow going effortlessly. We'll try levitation again, since it's the most important skill. Try not to hit me with anything this time, okay? I will. She beamed, cheeks a little rosy. No, that had to be his imagination. She had fur, after all. I read the books you gave me. I can do this. She focused her attention on the stones. I can completely do this. She completely couldn't.